Hey there, I'm Lance.
And I'm Jeremy.
And this is Hard to Master. Today we are going to be looking at a classic, Scythe, the legendary box that we got out here. We've got some upgraded components and pieces on the table. This is a beautiful looking game. It's one of my favorite.
It is my favorite.
It is Jeremy's favorite. This is one of our favorite games, and it is a very hard to master game. There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of things to think about in this game, but man, this is an excellent game. So Jeremy, what are your thoughts on Scythe?
Like I said, Scythe is my favorite. It is a game that when I got into the hobby, I went to a board game meetup with another friend of mine. We had played King of Tokyo and Werewolf and some other games, but then at one of the game nights that we have in our Oklahoma board game community, this was on the table. Now, it wasn't this nice at the time. There wasn't painted pieces, but it did have the realistic resources. And the realistic resources and the gameplay, everything just sucked me in. But the biggest thing was, dang, these pieces are for a board game? Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
You can do this. Since then, this has probably been one of my most upgraded games. I've painted pieces. The mech paint job isn't as good as some of my other stuff. I actually had a local guy check out. You could probably check out his if you want any tips on painting or anything, but he did all the heroes for all of, even the expansion characters. He has done all those. Josh with Mini Painting Studio did those. I did all the building paintings and the mech paintings, but yeah, most upgraded game. The metal coins was another thing. The metal coins and the realistic resources is what drew me in. I mean, I was like, wow, this is just amazing. Since then, again, the copy has definitely become more and more advanced. The playmat would not fit on the table here. This actually probably a good thing that I didn't have this board framed yet to go in my board game room yet, so I could use it for here. If it had, we probably would have just used the modular board. But yeah, I can't say anything more than I enjoy the game very much. The pieces and table presence is a huge thing for me as far as this game goes, and it just looks amazing. And this is one of the pinnacles of what an upgraded game can look like. And there's others that you can do this to. There's many painters out there that are paint minis and stuff. I know that you enjoy the theme that you're getting dragged into whenever the minis are painted. Again, the resources, the coins, printing your own buildings based on a group on the Facebook. Any questions you have about where some of these pieces came from, we can comment either in the YouTube video or on one of the other channels. We can tell you where we kind of got the files for that, or where those resources may be available to purchase, as well as the legendary box or the Meeple Realty. Meeple Realty shouted out there, an Oklahoma company with the insert. So, Lance, what you got? I know you got more thoughts on the game itself.
For me, Scythe is a game that it just combines some of the best mechanics, elements to board gaming. You've got your worker placement, resource management, area control. I mean, this game has it all. And a lot of people look at this game and say, well, this is a war game, and in a sense it is, but this is so much more than a war game. This is, at its core, this is, you are trying to get resources, build an engine to get yourself the stars, and doing it quicker before anyone else. It's in some ways, it's a race game. I know that probably has a negative connotation out there, but at its heart, that's what it is. You're racing to get stars, and you're trying to build your engine, your influence, to have the most points once you've reached 6 stars. So
when it comes down to it, it's an action selection, resource management, area control game. As far as the race element, it's how fast can I get this stuff done to get those 6 stars out. And at that point, that doesn't mean that you win the game, but it means
Right.
that you have a good chance, but it all depends on what you've done on the board and throughout the game as far as collecting coins, resources, and area control.
And I think that for me is why I like Scythe so much, because you won't know exactly how well you're doing until the very end. And you can have an idea, you can see how many coins you have, you can see how many stars everybody has, but it's not over until it's over. And I really like that about this game. You can really, amp up your efforts right at the end to try to put yourself as close to winning, if not over the top. And it seems like this game always has an exciting finish.
I feel like it can end quickly. I feel like you can know a good deal about how you're doing based on how the board's set up at that time. Coins that you can see in front of people, things like that. But how it ends, it can drastically change the end of the game, how it ends on one final turn. And we'll talk about that with the strategy. Real quick, another thing that I missed whenever I talk about the different pieces and stuff, there are a lot of different module expansions and things that you can do. For instance, the Scythe Encounter cards, which was created by gamers. The board gamers that play this game helped to create this deck. I will point out my favorite card in the deck. If you're watching this video, this is my favorite card in the deck. And it's made by Eric, it looks like Leishman, and Jason Tripp. As I get older, the LASIK's wearing out and my eyes are getting, that's real small print. You all created my favorite card in this game, and it is the one that the second option that you can choose is to bet on a game of lawn tennis. So as we get into strategy, if you pull this card, and let's say that you have 10 or 20 coins in front of you, and you decide to flip that coin for heads or tails, if it's right, you double that coin. So 20 turns to 40. You should win the game unless you have played very poorly on the board. If you lose that coin flip,
you're probably going to lose.
You are probably going to lose if you wagered a 20 coin, but you still have a chance if you have played well on the board. So this is a great card. I know it's not the best card to get things from, but as far as theme and betting and
it's exciting,
a push your luck element, this is it right here. Card number 51. If you find it, again, Eric and Jason, you all have created my favorite card. I appreciate you.
But Jeremy, you would say you would definitely recommend getting that encounter deck.
I would, and it's because you go through the cards over and over, and they are much more balanced than probably these would be. There are some cards in here that you're like, oh, man, that's not fair. You got that card, and you'll even say that with this. You're like, oh, I got one that's not very good. Usually the top option is the same one, or pretty close to being the same. On this deck can be drastically different, but it is nice to switch it up. I don't always play with this deck, but I do like to switch it up depending on what else is on the board. Because cards like this can spice it up. It's not always gonna make or break you, depending on what happens. Most people probably would not choose the betting line. I always choose it. Now, if you want to play it safe, you can choose that and just flip a 1 coin and get 1 coin. It's not very, because it's the same on both sides, but it's not very eventful. In addition to an easy expansion like this to blend in, you do have the Invaders from Afar, which give you two additional factions. You got Albion and Tagawa over here. They are tougher to play with, as we'll get into which factions are maybe a little bit easier, or the probability of them winning based on boards can go up if you look at statistics on Scythe, which many of the people in the group or know about this game already know about. But those two factions are a little bit tougher, but they are enjoyable to play. But it will require more of a hard to master technique to do well with them. You have the airships module that you can get with that expansion. A wing gamut. I don't use that as much. That's the actual airships is not one of my favorite expansions to use. I've used it multiple times, but the in-game tiles and switching the game up part of it that you get with it very good. I do enjoy that aspect of it. King of the Hill, or some different
Right.
games that you can play with that, ending the game differently than placing 6 stars. You also have the campaign with Rise of Fenris. That is a great one. We've been through that. If you have, I won't give any spoilers, but one of our friends really ended the game very, very quickly and has given another one of my friends a very low score. We will not do any names or anything, but that was a very enjoyable moment. It's hard to live down the lowest score ever. I think it was like 4 coins.
Yeah.
But now there's the modular board that you can change the setup of the board and maybe have a different starting space to alter the way it plays. So there's a lot of different ways to change how the game plays. That is important for me. I do like expansions that give me different options and keep the enjoyment of the original game, but add different modifications to give you something different so you don't get tired of the game. And then you can go back to the base game and you're playing it like you haven't played it in forever, and so it's just as enjoyable as you played it many months or years ago.
It adds the different modules and expansions add just enough to give you a different feel for the game without it being too overwhelming that you feel like, man, I'm having to learn a new game every time. It's not like that. It's just enough of a little bit of a twist that it makes it fresh and interesting without it being like too overwhelming, too much of an overload. So I agree with you there, Jeremy, that the expansions and modules are great.
As far as which expansions you should get, all of them. But in order, I would say getting these encounter cards, since they're cheap or inexpensive, not cheap. They're inexpensive to get. That is a good one to just switch it up. I would say the Rise of Fenris campaign is great just because it gives you a campaign feel, which is not a long campaign. It's like, I think 9
But the storyline there is really cool.
Story's good.
Yeah.
And then after that, I would say
Invaders from Afar.
It's tough. As far as having 2 more factions and they're printed on the board, yes.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to switch gameplay up more and maybe you don't have the campaign yet, I would say Wind Gambit, just because those in-game tiles and then the ability to use that airship to transport different things and give you different things. So I like Invaders from Afar a little bit better just because I like using those factions are tougher. So if you play with new people and you give those, when we play, I always like to get a different faction. Again, we're going to go into some faction stuff in just a second, but I like to play something different. I don't like to play the same thing and try to win like that. I like to learn a new faction or a new way to play the game to make myself better. And so having those 2 factions being a little bit tougher, and I mean, as far as a collector, you have to kind of get those early. But if you don't care about those 2 spots and you don't care about doing that, push that aside. Grab the Wind Gambit so you can have those additional tiles to change the way that you play, and maybe an airship that gives you the differences that you need. But those would kind of be the orders that I would say. But all of them are great. If you just got money to spend or you got a gift card or something for Christmas that you're just sitting on for a miniature market or somewhere, go ahead, scythe it out, get everything you can, and start to master it.
So, Jeremy, let's get into strategy on this.
I'm going to move the box.
Yeah, let's get that out of there. So let's get into strategy on this, and we're not going to spend, overwhelming amounts getting into the analytics and everything here, but we are going to talk about if you're this faction and if you have this game board set up, because if you're not familiar with Scythe, obviously go out there, watch how to play video, but your game is going to be different depending on your faction, but also on your what are these things called? I can't think of it off the top of my head. The mech boards and production boards. Yeah. Your game's just going to be different every time you play because of those things. And so we're going to just briefly talk about different tips and ideas that you might choose to do if you're that faction, if you have that production board, and give yourself the best chance to win. So I would think that the first one to start off with, which is probably the easiest one, is going to be the Rusviets. Would you agree with that?
Rusviet, I also believe, is the most straightforward and easiest to play with because their main ability is you can do the same spot on the board over and over again, and that is very important. I usually try to get a new person to play them just because if they make a mistake and don't see something, they can go do it again.
Come back to it again, yeah.
And so you cannot do, I believe it's industrial and Rusviet. It is very frowned upon because it is just very strong of a combination based on the resources there and the abilities and things. It's too, but I agree. Rusviet is the number one easiest to play with. There's another one that's just very, very close after you've played a few times. But if it's your first game, this is the one you should play with.
So when you're playing as Rusviet, and like Jeremy already said, their special faction ability is they can take the same action more than once. They can take it over and over and over again. And being sensed that the resources that are going to be right there in front of them are going to be steel, producing workers, and then you have to move to get there, but it's right there in your little peninsula is oil. Those are going to be the actions that you can take time and time again that will give you a workforce, it will give you a mech force with the steel, and it'll allow you to upgrade those actions so that you're even producing that stuff even faster, getting out mechs without having to pay the most steel. That's a pretty good combo, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, in addition to that, once you get the faction abilities with the mechs done, getting to the factory should be, if you have Rusviet in the game, they should be the first one there.
Yep.
When you go to the factory, you get to look through, and there wouldn't be the whole stack there. It'd be based on player count. But you get to look through the few that are there and pick the card you want. Talking about the factory, because anytime I play, it seems to be very hard to get lumber, and lumber is needed for building. So usually, if one of these two cards are in I don't know the best way to show, and their sleeves, that might have a little bit of a glare. That's a fail.
Here, we'll put them out here.
But if you get to the factory first and you're having trouble building lumber, card number 11, card number 7. I always look for those because they're easy to get buildings, so that way you can work on this bonus over here for in-game, or just spread out and get things that you need. So getting to the factory for Rusviet is very important. Yeah. Very important to get that. Get a building, move out, just make sure at the end of the game that there's nobody else there with your building, whether you have one piece there with it or nobody else is there. But you need to get that building and move on.
Real quick, while we're on the factory, a couple of things I want to say on that real quick. I always try to make a point. Obviously, you got to get your main character there to be able to take the factory action. But I always like to try and work both my main character and a mech to get there too, so that I can leave the mech behind to remain in control of that factory while I send my main guy around trying to collect encounter tokens or do whatever I need to do. Another thing real quick, back to the buildings, I agree with Jeremy. I think these are very powerful factory cards to get, and going for the buildings, while it's not a very popular way to get a star, because lumber is kind of a harder thing to get throughout the course of the game, if you have these cards, you only need to do it 4 times and you've got a star. That's a lot quicker than a lot of the other ways that you have to go to get a star. So
and you say that, and if you have this one, you're also going up on popularity.
Yeah, you're getting popularity.
And we talked about earlier, for popularity, this is very, very difficult. It rarely happens whenever I play a game, and there's things like this or cards that are getting that person to do that. This is where I try to be. 13. If you can be at 13, you're going to get the maximized bonus. Doesn't matter if you're at 15 or 13. So getting to 13 is the best. If you cannot, you need to get in this range. This range is very hard to win with.
You're not likely going to win unless you have a ton of money that you've just stockpiled. You're probably not going to win.
Or if you're playing with another faction, we'll get to in just a second. That's
Yeah.
another way that might work. But normally you try to get to 13. I feel like that's pretty good on Rusviet. We've hit a lot of the major things. I think we should just move around the board.
Okay.
And we'll come over here to Crimea. Crimea is going to be the second easiest to play with, I believe. It has been said you do not want to mix, I believe, Patriotic with Crimea. It can be overpowered at times too. So that is something you may consider not having happen. But over here at Crimea, you're really trying to get that food so that you can enlist. And by enlisting, you're getting more and more cards by filling up the spots on the that enlist from the production board, as well as placing it onto your faction board. And so getting those resources so that you can play a resource instead of, or play a combat card instead of a resource is going to be big. In addition to that, when you're moving with mechs, you can move around the board a little bit depending on which factions are in the game. If you get the Wayfarer ability, you can steal combat cards. If you have the Scout, well, that's going to help give you resources for building mechs or buildings and things. But we didn't talk about speed. You need to get that speed mech before the end of the game. Having that additional movement with that plastic piece is going to make a big deal. Whether you're Rusviet or any faction on the board, the expansion ones will not give you that speed. They have other abilities, but the speed is important for all of the core factions.
Right.
But it may not be the one you want first. But I would say if you only have 3, that's probably one that you're going to want.
Now, I really like Crimea. I think it's one of my favorite ones to play as because, you know, just getting those combat cards and using them as resources is kind of a fun thing to do. It makes you feel like you have an advantage on the rest of the other opponents at the table because while everybody's having to struggle to get their engines going and to get those resources, you can kind of just pay out your combat cards as though it's kind of like money.
Well, and at times you can have an abundance of combat cards. I mean, right now we have this set up just randomly kind of to show where people could be if you had a 5-player game and how close everything can be. In Scythe, there is usually not a lot of combat. Now, if you attack somebody and they have no reason, it could be a back and forth attack that can happen. But usually in a game of Scythe, there's probably, unless you're just stretching the game out for different reasons, which I tried not to do. I try to get it done. There's usually maybe 2 to 3 battles tops, usually in a game of Scythe. And some of them may not even come until the end of the game. So you do not want to have 6 or 7 battles. If you do, it's not going to be fun for probably 1 or 2 people are probably just back and forth at each other.
And I would say that as Crimea, that if you are someone who likes to be aggressive and likes to fight a lot, they're probably not your faction to play with because you want to save those combat cards for resources. You don't want to waste them in battle, especially if you might risk losing. And so that's not a great idea to have that be your strategy. You more so want to build your engine, get your engine going, and spread out and try to
You're more of a
away.
resource management faction with them. Rusviet can be combative because they can move.
They can move
quickly, and they can ramp up really fast. But Crimea is more of a turtle at first. Not the most turtle, but they are a little bit of a turtle.
Now, the next faction we'll talk about, they do like to battle. They do like to fight. In fact, they are probably the most aggressive, war-hungry faction out there. The Saxony faction. And so Saxony, they're going to be very aggressive, looking to cause conflict and battle all across the board. They're very war hungry because you can get as many stars as you want from combat. And so you definitely want to be the aggressor in this. You want to make sure that your bolstering is as high as you can keep it. You're going to be taking the bolster action quite a bit. You're probably going to want to build your armory to keep your bolster keep going. There's a number of different ways that you can keep that bolster power back up to the max. because you're going to be fighting a lot if you're the Saxony faction.
Yeah, the Saxons need to get the game over as quick as possible. I have not played with them multiple times, but I've played with them multiple times, and I believe I've only won once or twice with them. I have placed 6 stars and got second place with them. I've done that multiple times with other factions as well, but the Saxon faction is one of the hardest, I believe, to play with, because if you let the game go long, you are not going to win. It's very, very difficult to win if the game goes long. It's
hard to have your popularity be really high if you're going to be war hungry in combat. And so that's one reason why you want to end the game really quickly, to prevent other players from getting way up here in the 3rd tier. If you've got other players that are already getting up there, you want to abandon that strategy of fighting everyone, because you want to then get your popularity up there, and hopefully that can save you the game. Otherwise, you're probably toast.
So with the Saxons, you can do 2 objective cards, and objective cards should not be your focus of the game. Now, you may have a couple that you see that they are possibilities on the way. And if you are the Saxons and you have 2 cards that line up fairly well, you are lucky. And that is great, because you can place 2 stars. You can do both of them. Everybody else can only do 1. And I will tell you, do not focus. There are some games I'll see that, I'll go, I don't even want to try. I'm not even going to try to do the objection card, because I know it's going to take me too far out of what I'm used to doing. And there's some things that I like to do at the end that I can give you as a tip to kind of finish things off. And at times these cards don't line up at all. If it says I need 16 resources on 1 hex, it ain't happening. I'm not going to turtle that much. Now it's a good challenge, and I may try it sometime, but maybe in the campaign, so I can carry it on and win the whole war, not just that one battle. But do not focus everything on this if it looks like something that you are not going to be able to do. It is okay to just put those aside, focus on the other things. Yeah. It's especially if you're the Saxons, you should be going for mechs, you should be going for combat and bolster. Those are the 4, and if you can get some cards, it's even better. Yeah. But the majority of the things on there, you want to get it over quick.
Right.
Bolstering is important for them. You need to bolster. Unlocking the upgraded bolster.
Yeah.
Unlocking, and it may be on a different spot, but unlocking that additional bolster. Unlocking over here, this recruit.
The recruit, yeah. The enlist.
This armory. You need that. That will get you up quick. You will get that star very quickly. It will help you when you're doing the battles. You want to get this up as quick as possible so you can burn through it and end the game.
Yep. So let's move over here to Polania. Isn't that right? Isn't that what their name?
No D. Polania.
Yeah, okay. Polania, excuse me.
The Polish.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, they're probably my least favorite faction to play as. I feel like their faction ability is not super strong. They get to be able to take more than 1 action, 2 actions, right, on these encounter cards over here. And, that's kind of a chance of luck kind of thing, depending on what card you get. You're at the mercy of the card you draw, because some of them, as we've already said, some of them can be really good. And in that case, man, that's great. But some of them can just be kind of, man, that's a bummer. And that just completely kaputs your whole entire faction ability. Plus, not to mention, you only have easy access to 1, maybe 2 of these. And beyond that, you're going to have to stretch yourself a little bit to be able to get to more than those 2 that are right there in front of you, especially if you're playing on a crowded board. So, Jeremy, anything else you want to say on them?
They, as with Saxony, are one of the toughest factions. I will agree. They are a turtle clan. You will be building stuff here as well. They do have lumber ready and available, which many of the factions do not. So that is very good, because they will help you get lumber for buildings and stuff. Another thing that they do really well is they can move to and from lakes. If you unlock that ability with the mechs, that's a very good one. You need to get workers out with the Polish. You need to get the workers out, because if other people go in there, other factions go in and make your workers recruit or run away and go home, guess what? They lose popularity.
Right.
So things you need to do are you need to get your mechs and move them from lakes to lakes so you can advance on the board because they are a turtle. I do like the upgraded meeples of them. They are
pretty cool looking.
They are a little bit better than some of the other ones.
So Jeremy, real quick, because you don't have steel readily available to you right here on your peninsula, the best probably way to hopefully get a mech is by getting this encounter space and hope that one of your options is to put out a mech. If that's true, I would say you almost have to do that so that you can kind of get off of your peninsula.
I would say if you can, you will need to trade, and depending on your board, it's going to depend. Depending on what you have set up will dictate if you will have to use coins or if you can store coins. It's changes the game based on that map.
Right.
If I have what I need where I'm at, guess what? I will produce it to a point as long as it's not costing me. If I don't have that there or I need it immediately and it lines up with my other action, so if I had this board right here where I can trade. Now you can see the trade ones right here, it needs more steel at the beginning. But if I were to upgrade that 2 times, now I only need 2, well, I can trade and get a mech pretty easily.
Yeah.
Again, they're a turtle clan, so you don't need your mechs out right away. I would say if you had engineering and you were the Polish, you need to go ahead and upgrade and spend your upgrades on you have wood, so you don't really need to do that, but the mechs need to be upgraded so that you can move out on the board more easily and surround kind of this area so you can invade wherever you want, because there are lakes all over the board.
I would also say that probably for end game, when you get close to the end game, you get that feeling like the game's going to end at any turn. You probably do want to try and claim some of those lakes because you're the only people that can be there, so you might as well take them for... I mean, yeah, there are other ways, but that's probably one of the easiest ways to be able to do it and get those territory spaces for this scoring column right here to give yourself some extra points. You're probably not going to have a whole lot of resistance and competition for those lake spaces, so a good idea to maybe get some bonus points there at the end.
Unless the Nordic factory is in the game.
Let's talk about Nordic.
They can move to lakes, to and from lakes. And so you have to be careful with that. If only one of these is in the game, then yes, they will help you with that. And that's one thing that I think about whenever I'm playing. But the Nordic faction, their meeple workers can cross rivers. Not lakes, but they can cross rivers to spread out and maximize, so they could come over here and get some food, or they could come over there and just kind of get in the way of things. It really depends on who's in the game as how they're going to do, but they can move across rivers.
Every time that I'm playing and Nordic is in the game, I'm a little worried being worried that they are going to just kind of spread across the board, and I want to try to prevent them from doing that, because the further they spread across, obviously that's less space for me to be able to go to unless I want to pay popularity, and I don't really want to do that. I want to try to be up here as much as I can, and so if I'm playing against Nordic, I always make sure to try and move towards them before they move towards me, because if I lose that battle, I feel like I'm giving them an advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, because Nordic can come over here when they're moving, 2 moves, and they're where they can produce workers. And you need to produce a lot of workers with them, because that's their thing. They can spread out. And so getting different workers around so you can get more and more resources is good. Know that you will pay that penalty, so you need to maximize and get where you need to be and get in the way. Again, you're trying to get those people in the way so that if other people try to run them out, well, they're coming down on the popularity track.
Yeah.
And you can stay where you're at, and you can continue to move up. And it's all about that multiplier when it comes down to it. So you need to get in their way, spread out, get the resources you need. You're a little bit less confined as some of the other factions out the gate to get the resources you need to build up. I will say that I believe they are the third easiest faction to use in the base game, even though they don't have that, like, their workers move across rivers. It's not a huge deal, like being able to repeat the same action or use cards for resources or combat as many times as you want and objective cards or get double here. They're just moving more, but if you play them right and you move correctly and you spread out like you should, just like you would, quick plug for one of the expansion factions that are kind of separated, and if you can spread out and get a good setup and network going away from, just branching out, it is tough for people because then they have to choose, do they want to send your people home, or if you were playing with Tagawa, do they want to go into that trap knowing they're going to lose something and then maybe send you home as well? And it's a lot of, is it worth, is a risk worth the reward?
Right.
So I still think blue is Nordic is the third easiest to play if I had to pick.
Yeah, I think I would probably put that as well. I would probably go Rusviet's, Crimea, Nordic, and then the Saxonies. And for me, Polania is the hardest.
I don't know. I'm torn on this because I think it's a toss up between these two.
Yeah.
Polania may be slightly easier, just depending on the board you get and how you go.
Yeah, it depends on the board you get. It also depends on who else is playing.
I feel like this is hard to end the game sometimes. I feel like this can be harder than winning with them. Yeah. When you win with them, it seems easy. Seems like it's easier than winning
I'm also
with them at
speaking
times.
from what's funnest to play. And so for me,
I would say they're more fun than them, but as far as winning, I feel like they may be a little bit easier to win with because if combats don't go your way, if your combat cards suck, if there's things that can really kill either one of these factions. If people attack you as Polania, you're in big trouble.
And Jeremy already kind of alluded to this a little bit before, which if you're the more expert player at the table and you're playing with some novices or people who've never played this game before, you definitely want to be one of these two factions and let them be one of these three over here on this side.
Or one of those two.
Or one of the expansions.
If you have that.
Yeah,
definitely. If you're advanced and you're playing with people that have not played this game or have only played it a couple times, you need to get this just to make it fair. It's not, or play this every time, but that's going to get boring. You need to switch it up, and these will definitely, because they are slower, they don't have that speed, but they can move around.
It takes different game styles playing as those two.
It feels totally different at times.
Well, there you guys go. That's kind of our strategy, tips, and tricks, depending on what faction you are. Obviously, we didn't get to all the different production boards.
I guess we should probably say, any how you finish the game or any little just personal tricks or tips that we do. So I've learned from playing with quite a few. I've probably played Scythe, not like millions of times or nothing. I don't play digital. I just play physical. And I've probably other than like Pandemic with legacies and different things, this is probably my most played board game. And I'd say 40 to 50 times, including the Rise of Fenris one time when we started another one. But getting 3 or 4 stars at the end of the game is for me a big deal. Knowing where people are on the board, moving to those spaces so that you can have multiple combats, maybe while completing an objective card, or that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
If you can do that to where you're getting 2 to 3 stars at the end, again, you wouldn't be able to get more than 2 combat stars unless you're the Saxons. But if you can do an objective card and 2 combats, or maybe in that move you had picked up resources, your bottom action is going to be put out that last mech. Finding a way to get at least 2, 3 stars at the end, ending it so other people don't get that one last turn is important.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the starting board, you need to find a way to end it. If you can end it, there's a better chance of you winning the game than if you let somebody else win it. and they're taking your pieces off the board, or you're having to fight to keep your pieces on the board.
And I would say kind of maybe my tip for towards the end of the game is to start putting a strategy into play for how you're going to get those last stars early on. When I was learning Scythe, one of my biggest downfalls was that I had a good game plan for how to get the first 3 or 4 stars, but I had no idea how to get the last 2 or 3. And I would almost always end the game with 4 stars. I could never get 5. Sometimes I'd get 5, but I could almost never get 6. And so I found that I started having more success on getting 6 stars whenever I put a game plan into play in that first third of the game for how I would eventually get to those stars at the end. And that might be something like the upgrades, you know, getting 2 or 3 of those upgrades that you need before you get all of them towards the end. Or, you know, having all my workers out, I would have, you know, a good number of them out early on. And then by the end of the game, I could get them all out, and that would give me a star real quick.
I would say it's going to depend on your board, but there are certain stars, placement of stars that are going to be important in every game. I will almost always get full bolster.
Yeah.
Because not only does it get you a star, if you stockpile it and then use it to end that game or do this, I will rarely ever get popularity. It is the toughest star, I believe, to get in the game, along with buildings sometimes. Combat, I will at least get 1. I will try to get at least 1. I can't guarantee trying to get 2, but I will get at least 1.
Combat, to me, real quick on that, especially depending on what faction you are, that's one of the easiest ones you can get, and quite honestly. If you can have your bolster up, you get lucky on pulling a good combat card.
You could luckily get a combat. If you're playing with multiple people and you know that they're going to be fighting somebody else next, and you go in there and they don't want to waste their stuff on you, I mean, and they've got another, I mean, you can get this
pretty easy
on accident sometimes.
Yeah.
Objective card, I will try to do if it lines up. If it's ridiculous, if both of them are ridiculous, I won't even mess with it. I will try to get this by the end, maybe. That's another one. If I'm producing or something, or I have something here and then I move. So that's another one. Enlisting. Enlisting is very important in this game. We have not talked about it enough. If you're in a 3-player game and you do not enlist, you will have no chance of winning.
You can't
if the other people enlist. You have to enlist in a 3-player game. If it's 4, you really need to enlist. Depends on, you have to watch the people next to you to see what you want to enlist in first so that you can get those benefits, because they may, if they're on a track for that, they will pay it to get you it. If they aren't on a track or you pick the wrong one, they will not do that one to get you benefit.
So I'm going to throw out there real quick. I almost always enlist, and I try to make it be one of my first stars, if not my first star, because I know that other players are at some point, to some extent, they're going to be doing it too. And I want to cash in on that. I almost always try to get the mech enlist, because I feel like you have to have mechs to win the game. You might not need all 4 mechs, but you're at least going to want 2. And then I also try to make sure to do the enlist recruit action, because I feel like other players are going to want to cash in on that as well. Plus, that gives you combat cards. So.
The great thing about this game is you can win by different things. Even on the achievement sheet, it says win without doing this. So I might try, you know, if someone tells me you won't win, you know, if you don't do that, there's a good chance I'm going to try to do it without. Yeah. So doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it. It is very important that you think about it, and if it's not going to benefit the other people too much, depending on when they do it and what they do, you need to go for it. Buildings, rare that I ever do all 4. I have done it. It's just usually it's with this, you know, it's with something that has lumber available, or I've got a board that requires very little.
Yep.
If I can get it down to 1, there's a chance, or if I get these cards, which are very important for building buildings. Mechs happen a good majority of the time. Almost I will get a mech star.
100% of the time.
Not always though. You can do it with 3 mechs and just combat if you're getting the other stuff. Upgrades is tough because it's 6
Yeah.
different times, but it makes your life easier on some of the other stuff. So it is important, but it is tougher than some of the other ones. But again, all this depends on what you get dealt. If you're like us, I usually randomize it now. I don't let people pick unless I've got new people at the table. I will set those aside and pick them, or if I'm playing, I will pull the easy ones out, put in the hard ones, then shuffle and pull mine to try and make it fair. And I believe just wiping people off the board isn't going to be as fun.
No.
And so trying to make it as even as I can. So those would be tips that we believe at the end of the game and throughout the game where you want to place those stars. I know this video is a little bit long, but we've gone over a lot of stuff. So we've gone over different modular expansions and expansions you can get. We've gone over components and how you can upgrade that to make this game personal. You can personalize this game to however you feel. If you just want the base copy, like Lance, that's unpainted, go ahead. It's still a fun game. If you want to upgrade it and get meeples or paint your pieces or find realistic resources, or my biggest pet peeve is the cardboard coins I told you. Get the money. It makes the game feel much more involved, and that may not matter to people. That is perfectly fine. But we've talked about that stuff. We've talked about each faction and what is the easiest, what's the hardest, what you might try with that faction, as well as some other tips that we have in the game. So we've given you a lot of content in this video. Most of you didn't watch all of it, and that's fine. But I hope you got something out of it that you like and enjoyed it.
And we would love to hear your own tips and tricks, what you seem to put into practice depending on what faction you play as. Please, please, please leave that in the comment section down below. We'd love to see them and respond to them. I know I can say this for myself. I am not an expert or even a great Scythe player. I think I'm above average. And I can probably do better myself, and so I would love to hear your tips and tricks out there, and hopefully beat this guy every now and then.
I'm still waiting for the day, Lance.
I've lost to him by like 1 or 2 coins so many times I can't even tell you.
That's in most games.
Yeah, that is.
Sometimes I just string you along and
let me
feel
lose
really
by 1.
good for 3/4 of the game, and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah, that happens all the time. So. All right.
But this is a game that will not leave my collection. It's my number 1. I still continue to wait for something to knock it off. It hasn't happened yet. Jamie Stonemaier, thank you for making this game and all the expansions, and even taking the time to take real
really
gamers' ideas and let them give you an idea and put it into the game so that they can play it and their friends can play it, and they can tell people that they had a part in this game. And still one of my favorite publishers, but this is my favorite game from you, and I do thank you, Jamie. So anything else, don't forget, hit the like, subscribe. What else, Lance?
So make sure to like and subscribe so you can be notified of our new content. Hit that bell down below. We are trying to put out videos all the time on not only this channel, Hard to Master, where we review some of the more tougher, harder to master games out there, but also on our other channel that is a part of this, and that is Love to Hate, where we try to bridge gaps between gamers and non-gamers, where we're looking at lighter, family weight games that you would play with people who don't typically play board games, and how you can kind of maybe bridge that gap and hopefully help them ease into the hobby, or at least get them to sit at the table with you once in a while. So, all right, check that out.
Yeah, till next time. This was
Hard to Master.